Thank you, Gary. I appreciate you asking me to come do this. Like Greg, this is not something that I normally do, and I'm completely out of my element up here, but I'll do the best I can. So we bale hay for the horse market, and I guess I should say my beginning in the hay business is kind of similar to Greg's. My wife and I, neither one of us are from farming families, and we got into the hay business kind of accidentally just a few years after we got married. So hay is what we do, and kind of messing with hay equipment is kind of my hobby too. So I live and breathe hay, I guess. But anyway, I'm going to talk about a few things that work in our operation, and that'll probably be different than what some of you guys are doing. And I'm not trying to say that you're doing it wrong. I'm saying these are things that work for us for the type of hay that we make. And our target market is the horse market. We produce hay in small square bales exclusively. We don't no big bales, no round bales, just small squares. And we make a bit over 200,000 a year between hay and straw. What I'm talking about are things that work for us. It's the high-end horse market, so we get pretty good money for our hay, and we can justify spending quite a bit of money improving our equipment and getting the right equipment to make the best hay we possibly can. And I think my wife would tell you that for me, good is really never good enough. We're always trying to improve and trying to do better. We're not necessarily trying to be the biggest. That's never been my goal, but trying to be the best we can is always my goal, and that probably drives my wife nuts part of the time. But anyway, this is a hay dryer, and I'm not here to talk about a hay dryer today. This is a great tool, and this dries 188 bales an hour, generally speaking. That's hay that's maybe 22% moisture. But I don't think that's going to apply to that many people in this room. So I want to focus more on drying hay naturally. So I'm talking about making the most of what Mother Nature gives us. And I've heard for years and years when I go to things like this, all we hear talk about is capturing solar energy. Get your hay out there as wide as you can and focus on utilizing the solar energy. But what I think is not mentioned enough and not emphasized enough is talking about air circulation. I feel that that's equally as important as solar energy. And so what I'm really focusing on is reducing the drying time from the time we cut hay to the time we bale it. I think that's kind of what my focus is going to be this morning or this afternoon. Very, very little things can make a huge difference. For us, if I can reduce the drying time 1 hour, I can easily lose $16,000 an hour on the day that I'm baling if we're too late getting that hay dry and rain's coming across the field, or it looks like we're going to get rained on. It's huge, our losses. When you start looking at horse quality hay versus now it becomes cattle quality hay, now we've got a substantial yield loss. Our next cutting is going to be hurt because we're out on the field trying to rescue or trying to get this hay off the field after it's been rained on. So now we're hurting our next cutting too. So the losses are a lot higher than some people might think, at least for us in what we do. So we grow orchard alfalfa, we grow timothy, and some alfalfa. To me, it starts with the hay bine, and we run self-propelled hay bines, and I know that's not for everybody, but I think some of you might be surprised that at the advantages of a self-propelled, and for us, I started with a self-propelled hay bine when I was up to 150 acres years ago, and that was very easily justified in a 150-acre operation. Today we run 3 of them. There's more advantages to the self-propelled than I really can get into this morning or this afternoon, but the first thing is you're not leaving a wheel track in your hay. And I know a lot of you will say, well, you just run a rotary tedder through it afterwards and get rid of the wheel track, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But the other thing that we think is really important is we use full contact conditioner rolls. So these rolls, if you're not familiar with them, they're aftermarket rolls. You won't get them standard on a machine, but the rolls are made to run tight together. You take the shims out of your rolls and you run them tight together. You'll crimp the stem from top to bottom, and you can do a much better job conditioning your hay and getting it drying faster with those type of a roll. And if they're adjusted right, you're not macerating hay, you're not ruining it, but you're getting more of the stem cracked, which will significantly reduce your drying time. The other thing I'm a real big believer in is you need to cut your hay at least as fast as you're going to bale it. So if you're cutting 50 acres of hay and you think it's going to take you 4 hours to bale it, you need to be cutting it in 4 hours or under, in my opinion. There's nothing worse than being halfway across the field and now you're starting to run into moisture. You need to wait because now you're running into hay that was cut quite a bit later, and the sky's turning dark, which probably doesn't happen to you guys, but it certainly does to us. And if you got to stop and wait on hay to dry, or too many times operators just keep going, let's get this thing done, and now you've got hay in the barn that's spoiling because you didn't cut it as fast as you were baling it. So we run three hay binds, and I'm a strong believer in spending the money on the hay binds. What I really like about what I'm doing here, and we're using this size hay bind for very specific reasons. We're laying out an 8.5 foot wide swath, and the conditioner rolls in all the bigger hay binds, whether it's 13 foot, 15 or 16 foot, the conditioner rolls are 8.5 foot wide. So that's as wide a swath as that machine will lay out. And with 13 foot cut, that's leaving me a 4 foot, what I call dry space between the swaths. And I want to maintain that 4 foot dry space until the day I rake it and bale it. And I'll explain to you why I do that in a minute. So with the 13 foot cut and it laid out the way that is, I've got 68% of my field covered with hay. I call it 68% exposure. If you go to 16 foot cut, now you're down to 55% exposure because you still can only get an 8.5 foot wide swath, but now you've got 7 foot of space between your swaths that you're not really exposing hay to the sun. So, and again, I think a lot of people want to just come through with a rotary tedder, and I stole this offline. You can see that this rotary tedder has done a beautiful job of laying the hay out nice and wide and capturing all the sun it can. But my problem with doing that is I think most of us are cutting hay as soon as possible after a rain. So the ground's wet, and you're laying that hay down in the wet ground, and for us that's more times than not we're cutting hay and the ground is black. It might even be a little slimy on top. It's wet. And if you completely cover the ground with your hay, you've got no dry space to rake onto the day you want to rake. So in essence, you're doing what these people are doing in their yard. They're covering their yard with straw to hold the moisture in the ground. And that's what we're doing here with the rotary tedder. You're completely covering it. You're not giving yourself any dry space to rake your hay onto the day you're going to bale it. So again, I keep maintaining that dry space. But I'm also a believer in tedding hay. But I'm doing it differently. And I'm trying to show here, this is when we're raking it. You can see that we've got that space that's dry between the swaths, and that the windrow is on that dry ground where it will dry a lot quicker that day. Typically, we're baling hay within an hour of the time we're done raking it. But if I'm raking that onto wet ground, I'm going to have a hell of a time getting the bottom of that windrow dry. And you can see here in the picture that the ground is still wet underneath the swath. So back in '99, I was driving through Amish country, and I seen this. This happens to be a PTO type, but I saw a pull type tedder pulled behind a team of horses. And it's like, that is exactly what I need. That just fluffs the hay. It just lifts it and fluffs it. And a lot of you guys have probably seen those. And you'll see them a lot in Amish country. So I bought one, and I was really, really happy with the results. It did us a lot of good. But as we grew our operation, I started to realize that fluffer is not really, it's not for commercial production. And truly, and I've talked to the company that built it several times, that fluffer was designed for the Amish, by the Amish, for the Amish. It's really not for commercial production, although there's a lot of guys using it commercially today. The maximum speed that I found that I could run with those things was 5 miles an hour. So we started pulling 2 of them at a time, and then I started rigging up a hitch to pull 3 at a time. It's just like I was chasing my tail. And I talked to this manufacturer over 2 years, several different times, tried to convince them to consider upgrading the fluffer. And that's a 4-bar reel. And their response to me every time I talked to them was, this thing's going to go by the wayside. And I'm talking about, that's probably 97, 98. And this thing's going to go by the wayside. The rotary tedder is the wave of the future. And so anyway, I became convinced that they were not going to do anything about it. So we started experimenting, building some reels. I was going across Illinois just a couple of years ago, and I seen an Amish guy pulling these behind a team of horses, and I had to stop and get a picture of it. And that's actually me in the driver's seat. He didn't want me to take a picture of him, but he let me sit in the driver's seat, and I had somebody take the picture of it. And what I realized when you're sitting in the driver's seat, this guy's fertilizing his field as he's fluffing it. So. Not really what I want to do, but anyway, I just found it very interesting. So anyway, again, and this is another manufacturer, and this is truly made by the Amish. The guy told me, the Amish guy around there built them, but it's a 4-bar reel, and I felt that we needed to go to at least a 6-bar reel and make it hydraulic drive so that we could vary our reel speed, and I felt a 6-bar reel would allow us to go faster ground speed. So we started messing with some reels. And I probably threw 4 or 5 reels away before we got something that we were comfortable with that would work well enough for what we were doing. So I got these reels built. I was just pulling one to start with, experimenting with it. And when I got to where I was happy with it, I took the reels to a guy up in Michigan. I was really running out of time to try to get this thing done. So I bought this power unit out of North Dakota, and I had it shipped to a guy that I had met up in Michigan that builds carrot harvesters, pickle harvesters. He custom builds some really, really fantastic equipment. But he wasn't really doing anything in the hay business as far as equipment. But I asked him if he could marry these things together. I wanted them out in front. So this is him putting this thing together up in Michigan back in 2012. So here it is in the field, and you can see that we're maintaining the dry space between our swaths. So we've got a place to rake hay onto dry ground, yet we're getting the hay up in the air, we're getting air through it. So I would typically cut, let's say I cut Monday morning, I would typically go out Tuesday morning and fluff it, and if I'm really up against the weather, I might go out again later Tuesday or even possibly Wednesday morning. But typically for us, we're baling it, we're cutting it one day, we're fluffing it the next day, we're raking and baling it the third day. That would be typical, but it can be 5 and 6 days, as everyone knows, but that would be generally our rule of thumb. But anyway, I'm getting this hay up in the air, and this is where I'm talking about we need to be talking more about wind energy too, and maximizing, what we get from the wind. Chris, can you turn that video? I'll just give you a short little clip of what this looks like going through the field, and you'll see this is lifting the hay. It's far more gentle on the hay than a rotary tedder is. So I can be out in the middle of the afternoon fluffing hay and not knocking all my leaves off. In fact, I don't want to fluff my hay when it's wet. If I'm out there fluffing it when it's wet, it falls like a wet rag back to the ground, and it doesn't stand up in the air. So I want it to have a little bit of body to it before I'm starting to fluff it. It'll stand up in the air better. If I've got an awful lot to do, I might start a little early, and then I might go back over what I've just done. But I'm enough of a believer in this that we're just finishing up on a second one of these that we're going to start running 2 of them because we just can't quite get enough done some days with one machine. And this will do 36 acres an hour, something like that. We run this thing at 8 miles an hour in the field. So that's all, Chris. Thank you. Anyway, so I think that maybe people ought to consider trying. You can buy one of those Pequa pull-type fluffers, very reasonable. It might be something you might want to consider, but it's important to get your windrow laid out as wide as possible, but yet maintain some dry space to rake onto. Well, I guess it did work. Never mind. You're good. It didn't work earlier. So anyway. So the advantages to tedding to reduce drying time, you're maximizing the exposure to the sun, but more importantly, maximize air circulation. And I think that you need to think about that maybe a little bit more than a lot of us have been told to over the years. So the advantages of the fluffer versus the rotary tedder, You maintain the dry space for raking onto. It's more gentle on the hay and it saves leaves. You're able to fluff when the hay has more body to it. I wouldn't even dream of running a rotary tedder. And again, I'm talking about alfalfa. If we're talking about Timothy, all bets are off. Timothy straight orchard grass can handle a rotary tedder when it's dry, but alfalfa absolutely cannot. I mean, you're just destroying your relative feed value. We have a larger window of opportunity to get the job done with a fluffer type of a tedder versus a rotary tedder, because of you've got such a short window when it's absolutely too wet to be doing anything with, to the point where it gets too dry. And you also get a lot better, more uniform windrows, which gives you more uniform bale length. In the business that we're in, the package means an awful lot, and they want to see very uniform bales, and the more uniform the bales are, they see value in that. So that's also another advantage to that. You also get less bleaching. When you're completely covering the ground, the hay is closer to the ground, is laid down more closer to the ground, but you're also exposing that much more to the sun, which is increasing your bleaching too. So, and again, this is for the horse industry. If you're feeding cows, if you're feeding sheep, you may not care so much about bleaching. It may not bother you at all. But again, this is where we're raking hay, and I'm showing the dry space, showing the wet space. Somebody told me probably 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I went to Canada to look at hay dryers. I went to New York to look at hay dryers, and both those guys told me that you need to do everything you can. They started asking me what we were doing, and I was running basket rakes at the time. I was running a pull-type hay bind. There were a lot of things and I wasn't using any kind of aftermarket conditioner roll. And they said, you need to improve all of those things before you even remotely consider a hay dryer. And they were absolutely right. The one thing they were wrong about is they said with energy costs going through the roof, this is 20, 25 years ago, there's no way we're going to be running hay dryers in the future because the energy cost is going to be too high. They were wrong about that one. We figure for our hay dryer, it's costing us less than $10 a ton in energy cost to dry hay. So I am a proponent in hay dryers. I'm not trying to down it. We've got one. We love it, but we only use that for a rescue. I never bale hay with the intent of drying it if we got the weather to make it naturally. Naturally dried hay smells better. It's better hay. Dried hay might look a little bit better, but it has very little aroma to it. It's like we're pushing all of the aroma out of the hay when we're drying it. But it has saved our butt a lot of times, and it's paid off. But I think you want to consider the best rakes you can possibly find, the best hay binds you can find, and have an ag economist would look at what we have in equipment and tell us we're absolutely crazy. We were way over invested in equipment, but we started with nothing, and we built a pretty good line of equipment, and it's all been paid for by the hay business. So they'll never convince me that we have too much invested in hay equipment. It has paid for us very, very well. So this is a slide you've seen before. I'm down to 1 minute. Thank you. A couple of things. I guess are there any small square baler guys out here? Guys that are commercially selling small square bales? You're the only one here. A couple guys. Are you guys familiar with? I got a couple things I could talk about, and I only got a minute. But if you're baling very much, is anybody familiar with double balers that are just coming on the market right now? I see a couple of nods. There's a couple of manufacturers that are just coming out with double two-tie balers. So these are absolutely double the capacity of a single baler. I'm going to skip some of this stuff and go to. We started in 2014 messing with a double baler, and that's something that same guy in Michigan. We were working together on this thing, and when this guy started building this baler, he had never worked on a baler in his life. So it was a lot of back and forth figuring out what we were doing. But this is actually a double baler. This is not cutting edge technology. This is bleeding edge technology. We lost our ass on this. It didn't work. So we had to go back to the drawing board. We started over again several years later. We took a 3-tie commercial baler, we cut it completely in two, tore it completely apart, added a knotter, changed the chamber, and we made a double. This is a double baler, so it's baling two bales at a time. So it's truly double what any single baler will make. And 2 days ago, we ended up working an agreement out. I wasn't going to get into the baler business. We built 4 of these, and we were not interested in selling balers. But we worked on an agreement with Agco Heston, and they started working on this back in 21, I think. Until 2 days ago, I have not been able to talk about that. But they just went public with that baler. Their baler's exactly like this, but it looks 10 times cooler than this. They've really done some cool shielding on it and twine boxes and stuff. They're going to have that at the Louisville Farm Machinery Show and also the Tulare Show in California next week. So just 2 days ago, they actually acknowledged that they've built these balers, and they'll be actually able to be bought this spring. So anyway, I'm out of time, so that's what I've got.
All right, thanks, Bill. Probably take one question for Bill.
John.
Chris, or John, sorry.
That's fine. That's fine.
I should look at my paper. For John, as Chris gets his presentation brought up.
Go ahead. Okay. I use self-propelled bale stackers, if you're familiar with that. That, to us, that is the fastest way to get the bales off the field in our operation. But all of our hay acreage is within 3 miles of one of our barns. Most of it's within a mile. We've got some different barns in different areas. So we don't have to go a long distance. So that's by far the fastest method for us. There are guys that use accumulators that work very well. I'm not a big fan of accumulators personally because I love the bundle, but I don't like the package out of the field. The bales will spoil in the middle of that and you don't know it. So we actually bundle, but we bundle right before we ship it out, not in the field. You got to be 3 to 4% drier to use bundles, and that's in my view. So.
Do you use any propionic acid?
No, I used propionic acid for 10, 12 years. I don't want to badmouth it. I personally hated it. There's always a nozzle plug, and there's always this going wrong and that going wrong, and I got this crap all over me, and I didn't like it. When I built that fluffer, we took the acid applicators off all our balers. Now, last year we did start using a dry product to experiment with. I'm not 100% sure. If you ask my wife, they're going to get taken off tomorrow, but they're probably not gonna. But I think they're doing us some good, but I prefer not to use preservative. But there's times we really need to do it.
Great. Thanks, John.
Thank you.